there, my name is Matthew Rowett from the CRCC Asia West Coast office in the USA. We actually just moved from San Francisco to Berkeley, California, right next to UC Berkeley's campus, so right down the street. I wanted to talk today really about what an international internship opportunity can do for you. This is in regards to your career, your professional development, and specifically how our program is formatted in Manchester can really jumpstart your career and jumpstart that job search for you. I think the first thing I wanted to touch base on is the question of the highlights of our Manchester internship program. I actually personally was part of the decision team when we were thinking about starting a Manchester program. And although I am an American, and of course I don't know as much about the city as I would like to, Manchester seemed like a great opportunity for us just because it is an up-and-coming city. I was last year stationed in our Shenzhen office, and I'll actually be joining our Shenzhen office this summer. And Shenzhen is a very interesting city because it is very up-and-coming in the tech scene. And this is where we saw Manchester. This is where we see the city of Manchester being in maybe 2 to 3 years down the road. A center for global hubs like Google and Facebook are actually already moving to Manchester. And we really saw that Manchester is, of course, cheaper than London. And then at the end of the day, Manchester can provide the same professional development opportunities that you can get from any international internship program, specifically one competing with London. So I think the main highlight of a Manchester internship program is not just that you are going to be interning with a host company that can provide you with project-based work. All of our host company supervisors have been coached and really know how to give great job descriptions to our students. So you're not going to be getting coffee or tea or just working on a spreadsheet all day, but you'll actually have something to put on your resume. But in addition, you'll be exposed to the very international culture of Manchester, and furthermore, the very international culture of our programs. Our programs have traditionally been extremely international because we source our students from not just one location and one region, but we have outreach offices here in Berkeley, we have an outreach office in Philadelphia, and then of course an outreach office in London and Sydney as well in Australia. So when we're talking about an international internship program, we have to first talk about the logistics. The logistics that we've set up are going to be students are going to be living in our service accommodations. You'll have your own private bedroom, your own bathroom and everything. But the main question is, what can we provide from a professional standpoint? So although we've coordinated all of these cultural, social, and really business seminar events, the key of our international internship programs is of course going to be the level of work that you're going to get on the day-to-day interacting with your supervisors. What we've done is we've reached out to our long-standing contacts in Manchester. Our director, Daniel Nivern, actually hails from Manchester, so he has some insight into the business communities there. And what we've done is we've established a relationship with these host companies with the understanding that these host companies are really here to provide our students with a great international experience. So that means that we're not just providing them with a run-of-the-mill internship, but instead our host companies are going to be teaching about British business acumen, British business culture, giving a job description that will really stand out on any future resume for any future career seeker. The next thing I wanted to talk about was just the highlights of having an international experience on your resume. My experience is not in the UK. I actually come from a very extensive China background, but I can guarantee that every single one of our students, when they have an international internship on their resume, future employers look at that and say, hey, you interned in Manchester, you interned in London, you interned in San Francisco, you interned in China. And they will zero in on that and say, these are really the important things where you learn about our 5 main learning objectives. The first thing that I wanted to mention is that any international experience is going to give you cultural agility. when we talk about cultural agility, we first have to define what culture really means. And I often go back to the metaphor of culture being kind of like a fishbowl. You are constantly surrounded by your certain culture, and everything around you appears to be water. Every interaction you have basically has a certain cultural connotation within one, fishbowl structure, right? But as soon as you take yourself and plant yourself in another culture, in another foreign culture, you actually start to understand really that the day-to-day from the business experience, the day-to-day from just interacting with people, is very different in different cultures. And being culturally agile means really understanding how to adapt to that certain situation. Famously, our company is a British-based company, and through my workings with Brits in both San Francisco and, of course, in our London teams and abroad, I've learned a lot of things about how I interact with people, being from an American background and having the cultural connotation of being an American really supplanted into another business environment. And I think what we really have to focus on when we're talking about an international internship program is how this program doesn't just teach you about culture, but you get to experience this difference in culture. And when you're experiencing cultural agility, you're not going to be experiencing it saying, hey, this is a situation where I am being culturally agile right now. That's not usually how it works. Usually how it happens is interns and students actually have to run into some difficulties. They have to face some adversity with cultural miscommunications and then therefore reflect on them afterwards, after your first experience in a new cultural setting, and then say, okay, what did I learn from this experience? What did I learn about myself through this interaction? What did I learn about my communication style and how I interact with others through this experience? And therefore, how will I be more culturally agile in the future? How do I adapt to this situation in the future? So that's one of our main learning objectives here at CRCC, especially when it comes down to supplanting students from the US or Australia or China into the UK's setting. The second thing we also do want to focus on is in-country knowledge, meaning how does the UK differ from the US or Australia or China? And this really comes down to learning about the history. Manchester is a city that has a very long-standing history of innovation. It's where the first atom was split. It's where the first computer was invented. Right now, University of Manchester is at the forefront of a lot of the innovation that is coming out of the tech world right now. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of the material of graphene, which is a carbon nanotube structure that they've made. That is the world's lightest and strongest material. But there's a lot of innovation happening in Manchester, probably because of this history. And as part of our programs, we do go in depth teaching our students about Mancunian history and, of course, the UK's history in general, because it's very hard to extrapolate the two. In terms of the other learning objectives that we have, so we have so far cultural agility, in-country knowledge. We also do stress sector-specific knowledge. And this is essential for anyone who is interested in becoming a lawyer. This is essential for anyone who's interested in being an engineer. What does engineering or what does being a lawyer look like in a different culture, right? And a lot of the time, the previous idea was that you work yourself up in a field here now in the US, and then you start to gain a global understanding, and maybe then you get to travel abroad and work abroad. But now that's really shifted. In today's increasingly globalized world, a lot of what we see is actually people are starting to understand that they have to have a global experience first and foremost before they're even considered for a lot of these jobs and a lot of these roles. Just because intercultural communication and cross-cultural communication has become essential in any workforce. It doesn't matter where you're working today, if it's in the US or in the UK or in China, you are going to have to communicate with people from different backgrounds. Either that's a customer or a consumer. But the idea behind in-country knowledge is, of course, going to be understanding what cultural context a certain area has, and learning how to interact in that cultural context, while at the same time recognizing that you come from a different one. So it is a very self-reflective program. The next thing on our learning objectives, so we have in-country knowledge, sector-specific knowledge, and then of course cultural agility. The next thing we do focus on is going to be networking. In today's modern age, we have LinkedIn and we have Facebook, and today's communities are very interconnected. But as much as we connect digitally nowadays, we have seen that the best way to get a job, of course, is of course to know someone, or know someone who knows someone, right? And LinkedIn, I think, is a tool to do this. But our programs in Manchester really do focus on connecting you with the business communities. So we do have business seminars where you get to network with our host companies. We do, of course, have personal contacts there that we'd be happy to introduce you to if you're looking to establish your personal and professional networks. But this is really a way to first and foremost establish not just a network that you can fall back on when you're interested in doing another internship or getting a job, but also this is a great way just to gain connections in other places around the world. When I used to travel abroad, when I was back in college, I actually went on a program to Taiwan, and I can guarantee that I can stay anywhere around the world with those friends that I made on that first international experience that I had, just because the connections you make on programs like these do run very deep. And no matter where you're from, making that effort to connect, not just to the business communities, but of course, to other students as well, really turns out in the long run to be a great decision. And actually, I'm still great friends with a lot of the people who I met on my first international experience. Now, the question we really do have to answer is, of course, the last learning objective that we have. So we've been through cultural agility, we've been through sector-specific knowledge, we've been through networking, and then we've been through in-country knowledge. The last thing we want to focus on is employability. And this is a huge blanket term that we use to really mean anything that makes an individual more employable. And it's kind of hard to define something while saying, this is really the definition by using the word employability here. But it is very nebulous, and employability right now is actually very different from what employability meant in the past, or even employability 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road is going to be very different. So it is constantly evolving, but I can guarantee that one thing is going to remain constant. An understanding of global perspectives is a guaranteed way to make yourself as an intern or as a student more employable. When we talk about employability, there are a huge number of blanket terms under employability that we have to talk about. And that contains everything from perspective taking to resilience to humility, to learning how to connect with people, to learning how to send an email, learning some basic office skills, learning how to use a CRM system. All of this, really contributes to an individual's sense of employability, and our Manchester internship programs are really focused on this professional development for each and every intern. So that means as soon as you speak to one of our admissions advisors, we actually have you start reflecting on how this program is going to make you more employable. As part of the programs, we do actually encourage students to start that reflection very early on. And we actually have a goals sheet for everyone to fill out. So when you first get on the program, you're going to say, these are the things that I want to work on. These are the things that are going to make me a more employable candidate in the future. These are the skills that I want to learn, right? And of course, our admissions advisors here in Berkeley or here or in Philadelphia or in Sydney or in London, they're happy to work with you on these skills and tasks. And that's really what is essential here, knowing that you have an ally and a partner in trying to achieve these career goals. So when you talk about the Manchester program to them, they're really there to advise you on, first of all, what the program entails, and then second of all, really what this program can do for you, right? When we talk about employability, we also are going to be talking about, what makes you a good employee to our host companies. And different host companies, of course, have different understandings and perspectives on all of this. But at the end of the day, it disseminates in being a work-ready graduate, someone who is really trying to give their best and asking and reaching out for help when necessary. Our supervisors in Manchester are extremely open to this type of questioning, just because they are there to really help out and help understand where you're coming from and really facilitate the best cross-cultural experience from your perspective. Now, in terms of the next question I wanted to touch base on was just a little bit more about the city of Manchester. I've been talking very broadly about a lot of our learning tenets or goals and outcomes for our programs. But what I really wanted to touch base on was this city and what it can provide. First and foremost, Manchester is basically the capital of the North. It is becoming an international hub. It is becoming a city that, kind of like London, has a bigger upper class right now. Manchester is always going to be a bit more rough and tumble than London, and that I think is a great thing because there is a lot of Manchester pride there. And I've actually been through Manchester only once, and I've seen that everyone there is very interested in learning about your culture, learning about where you come from, but also learning, of course, about telling you about what makes Manchester unique. And that comes everything from the Curry Mile and the huge Pakistani and Indian population in Manchester and its location as a very international hub, to small things like just the day-to-day food that you can get in Manchester. And I think in general, this is the kind of city that we really look to for the future. There's a series done actually by Vice called Future Cities, and one of them is famously Shenzhen, but I think Manchester should be up there as well, because Manchester right now is experiencing a renaissance, not just in the tech industry, but also in some of the well-established industries in the UK, like the BBC. So if you've ever watched Planet Earth or Planet Earth 2, all of the producers and everything are based in Manchester in the UK. That's where David Attenborough records his voice. So I think in general, Manchester is a great way for you to get something on your resume, for you to really understand what is going on in the UK, and really understand not just the city of London and everything it has to offer, which is not too far away, but also the city that is up and coming, so to speak. And that's really what we as a company like to focus on. We like to focus on targeting a location and saying, in 5 to 10 years, this is going to be the place to be, and that's what we've done with China and Beijing and Shanghai and now Shenzhen, and this is what we're trying to do with Manchester. My favorite thing personally about Manchester, I think, is the spirit there. There's a lot of spirited people who support either Manchester City or Manchester United, but everyone there always has a football story or a story about going out in Manchester and having an epic time listening to the music that's come out of there. Our interns can expect a lot of great things from not just the pub scene, but also the music scene, as well as the, I guess, more intellectual scene, where Manchester is actually home to some of the biggest museums in the UK and some of the best museums in the UK, specifically the Museum of Science and Industry, where you can learn all about the Industrial Revolution, which actually started in the city of Manchester. Now, the last question I did want to cover before I sign off today is of course, what opportunities for you will there be after this program? Because we don't really see our programs as just a one-off experience over the summer. We want to take you through an entire career development journey, starting with your very first conversation with an admissions advisor at CRCC, all the way to going back home after you transition back from Manchester. What are you going to learn? What are you going to learn from this experience? And how are you going to really convey this to others? The opportunities that we provide are extensive, but they do require buy-in from your perspective. They require buy-in from the student or intern when it comes to talking about their experience. what we've started to institute is actually elevator pitches. How do you describe your experience to a future employer? How do you describe your experience and the challenges that you face working in a separate culture? To someone who's interviewing you further down the road for a full-time experience or a full-time position in the UK or a full-time position in your home country. This is something that we really like to focus on. So the opportunities are basically what you can make of them. And I guess this does require buy-in from your end, but CRCC is going to be a partner and an ally with you in terms of facilitating this self-discovery and, of course, helping you through any cultural situation, any cross-cultural situation. And we're really there as allies to make sure that you don't just have the best time and the most fun time and the safest time, but also the most potentially life-changing experience in terms of a professional setting where you can really emerge out of an international internship and say, I am a more confident worker. I know what to do when I get to an office. I know how to be deferential in certain cases, and I know how to take leadership in others. That concludes just the questions that I wanted to go through today. If you guys do have any questions, feel free to just type them here in the live chat box. But many thanks for joining, and I'll be waiting for just a few minutes here to see if anyone has questions, just so I can respond online. Hope everyone is having a fantastic evening if you're signing in from the UK or London or, of course, in Europe. And have a great rest of the afternoon if you are signing in from the US, and good morning for you in Australia.